can turn me. is the home of sim racing leagues. Our management tools allow you to recruit drivers and monitor their ratings and live splits. Find this and more at gridfinder.com. Sign up for free today.
Hello everybody and welcome back to MSVT Racing and welcome back to the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series. If this is the first time you're joining us, you've missed out on a couple of good seasons prior, but we are kicking off this season here at Silverstone, and what a place to do it really, having never really been here before. It's obviously we attended last season. We attended for the first time in real life last season as well. Kicking off this season, why not head to Silverstone? It always produces some really, really close racing. Qualifying has been incredibly close as well. We've got a packed out entry list, so lots to look forward to. Joining me in the commentary box this evening, I believe, potentially, is Zach Sweeney. Zach, how are you?
Yeah, very good, Jack. Thank you, of course, for having me. It's should be a lot of fun. I've been, ever since I confirmed to be on the commentary for this, I've been really stoked to get things going. I love sort of, this club style of racing, touring cars and sort of Clio racing and things like that. So, yeah, let's see how things go in the KAs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the KAs are always pretty much where you need to be watching, because it's sort of low power but very, very even racing. They all run obviously all running the Ford KA Mark 1, the 1.3 litre engine. So everybody's running sort of competition suspension, competition brakes, tyres. Everything is all sort of mandated and kept as close as possible. And in real life, obviously, all the ECUs are mapped, everything like that. So it really produces some incredibly close racing. And we've got a good field of drivers, a mix of experiences, some returning drivers, some new drivers as well, a range of teams from top to bottom of the order. So it really just produces some incredibly close racing and lots to look forward to. And of course, this is round one, so we may see some drivers wanting to be ever the optimist and maybe push a little bit harder in the early stages of the season. So that may be something to look out for. But here is the grid for this evening, how they will line up. Tom O'Farrell lines up on pole position with Jamie Peters-Ennis alongside. Row 2 of the grid is Greg Giles and Mark Calver. Then we get to Bobby Simmons and Colin Dunn. Nathan Maximin and Ben Abbott line up 7th and 8th. 9th is Gary Preble, a returning driver, definitely one to watch. Dan Abbott rounds out row number 5. Row 6 of the grid is made up of Ash Hill and Richard Pixley. Then it is Scott Thorne, Nick Reed, David Evans and Tom Selden. As we go even further down the grid, it is a packed grid as promised. We've got James Harvey, Scott Pucknell, Andy Greer-Hardy, James Armstrong, Ollie Ricks, Tim Parsons, David Edwards, Mark Hancock, Josh Walters, Costa C is how we'll refer to him as per his request. Then it is Peter Brett, William Hartley, Oscar Abruzzese. Pardon me. I think we might have a couple that maybe did qualify as well. We've seen throughout the weeks running up to this, lots of practice has been being made, and at Silverstone, not the longest circuit in the world, but as we mentioned, these cars are very, very close, Zach. So picking up an extra 100th, maybe even an extra 1,000th here and there, it really can be valuable to your championship aspirations.
For sure, yeah, and I think this is a really fun circuit to of course kick things off. We're very obviously not doing the full Grand Prix. That would take an absolute eternity in these cars, but the national layout, of course, we start on Cop on the Cop straight. We go through Copse, Maggots, and then we turn right onto that back straight towards Brooklands, Luffield, round off the lap through Woodcote. And of course, there's not very many corners, which means there's not a lot of time to make up time on a lap, which is why, of course, we're seeing some really, really close lap times being put in qualifying. I think it was something like the top 16 separated by just half a second or something like that. And of course, a lot of it is spent flat out on the straight. So slipstream should, in theory, be fairly important. We should see quite a long train of cars, hopefully all very, very close. Hopefully some a good long 60 minutes of racing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at some of the drivers. Maybe we need to keep an eye on Bobby Simmons, returning driver. Obviously, we mentioned a couple of drivers on the way through. Jamie Peters-Ennis, he had a good couple of results last season. Tom O'Farrell, normally he's in sort of the broadcast booth, directing area, whatever. He's jumped behind the wheel of a car, so definitely want to watch. Ollie Ricks as well, another returning driver. Gary Preble, very experienced in a real-life Ford KA. Attended last season's Winter Sim Series as well, so definitely want to watch. Costa C, we saw him there. Scott Thorne, and some new drivers maybe to keep an eye on. Scott Pucknell, he works at MSV itself. I've spoken to Scott a number of times, so maybe going to be an interesting one to keep an eye to see exactly how he gets on behind the wheel. Andy Griahadu again, a fairly similar name, definitely one to watch. Of course, we've got some brilliant sponsors on board, which you simply wouldn't be able to do it without as well. And EnduroKA, a perfect outfit to step into sort of motorsport. So why not, as a business, would you not jump at this? Obviously, MSVT Racing, they pull all of this together, and the brilliant work at EnduroKA. Grid Finder, pretty much the place to be if you're looking for somewhere to race. Be it on the sim or elsewhere, obviously you can jump on the Grid Finder website and have a little look to see what's available. Burton Power, they do some brilliant engineering work. They've been involved in motorsport for a number of years as well, so definitely go check those guys out. And Positive Perception, they've done some brilliant work with all of the liveries. They always work very hard to make what is, I think, a very good-looking grid. And we've got some funky sort of team names as well. Purple Sector Racing, obviously. Purple Sectors in these things, potentially hard to get, but you never know. It'll be good to watch. California Roll Racing, but obviously it's KA, California Roll Racing. And it's very similar. It's a nice little link to the real championship as well, because that's where you do see some fantasy liveries and some liveries sort of larking back to years past. There's sort of the Pink Pig Porsche, where there's a couple of those that have found themselves on a KA grid. We've got, I think, Camel Racing, obviously, an ex-Formula One livery. It really is, the world is your oyster, and they do have, again, back into sort of the real life perspective, an award called the Dagenham Dustbin usually goes to the best prepared car, and once you've won it once, you can't really win it again for the rest of the season. And one thing to note, and I'm sure you've picked up on it already, but we've got a brilliantly prepared grid, and all of the cars look fabulous.
They do indeed, and I do love sort of the way teams represent themselves out on the grid, because that is how people see you. You can't really see the driver as such when they're out on track. You just see the car and how beautiful the livery is, and especially sort of in the world of sim racing, where you do have a lot of artistic freedom, you can have some really, really nice liveries. And well, this KA is, well, it's a very quirky looking canvas, let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we've not mentioned, obviously, the racecraft that we've seen over the previous seasons and iterations of this championship has always been fabulous. We've seen some very, very close racing, absolutely door handle to door handle. And maybe more so here than elsewhere, we will see sort of aerodynamic assistance starting to play a part, especially all the way down the Wellington Straight up towards Brooklands. That's where we will see aerodynamic assistance playing a big part. If you can maximise your exit through Beckett's, almost the entry into Maggotts, to maximise the exit through Beckett's, that can stand you in good stead by the time you get right the way down into sort of what is usually dubbed as the stadium section in towards Brooklands. So definitely one to keep an eye out for. And they don't have monumental power figures, let's be honest. They're not going to spin the world the other way. But what it does do is it forces the drivers to really maximize momentum, and it's sometimes fairly similar to driving a go-kart, because if you go sideways too much, you scrub off some speed, but sideways just enough can really work for you. So it can be a bit of a shock to the system, because you can drive absolutely anything anywhere on Assetto Corsa, but KAs, you've really got to hustle the cars, but with very fine margins. You can't push them too hard.
Yeah, I mean, they're fairly easy cars to sort of get into and drive, but very difficult to sort of master. There is a very fine window in which you can go quick. I jumped into the car a little bit earlier on just to sort of have a feel, and it is a fairly fun car to drive. I'm not really fond of driving front-wheel drive cars as such, but the KA was quite an easy car to get into and settle. Obviously, comparing my lap times to the ones these guys have done in qualifying is pretty woeful on my part, but it just goes to show the level of talent that we've got on this grid. And you touched on momentum there. That is a huge thing in low power cars. You've got to keep that minimum speed up, especially at a circuit like the Silverstone National, because exits here are going to be so key. If you're slow on a straight, in the trains and the competitiveness of this field that we're going to see, you could very easily lose 2, 3, 4 places in the span of one corner.
Yeah, and just looking at the qualifying results at the moment, Tom O'Farrell, who is obviously on pole position, a 1 minute 18.851. Jamie Peters-Ennis, a 1 minute 18.871. So only 0.02 of a second separates those top two, which makes it incredibly close and gives you a good idea on what we're going to see in the race. And we've got Greg Giles just behind as well. He's not too far away in terms of lap time, but we have the 6 lights on. And for the first time this season, the EnduroKA Winter Series is away. Managing the wheel spin well, by the looks of that, is Tom O'Farrell. Farrell, potentially Jamie Peters-Ennis, obviously with the inside line, he may just be able to sneak his way through. No, he can't. Keep in touch with Tom O'Farrell off the start. Aerodynamic assistance, as we mentioned, is very, very crucial. Those top two already starting to build a margin to those cars behind, so we'll have to keep an eye just to see if those two are going to escape. It's a little bit of changing in the background as well. Tom Selden a little bit further down the order. He's got a good start and jumped up a place or two. But for the moment, it feels very, very uniform and fairly calmed down, but give it a couple of laps and we'll be sort of nose to nose, tail to tail once again.
I'm sure we will, but of course a very, very good start for our front lot. They've been able to keep it nice and clean into the first major braking zone, really, at Brooklands. We can see a couple of drivers going side by side. Simmons and Gilles running their way through. It's a very easy corner to go side by side, and of course the outside of Brooklands gives you the inside for Luffield. I think Gilles is going to be able to move their way up into fourth, but it's definitely not an easy battle given from Simmons, who is able to pick his way back through up into fourth, and all this is doing is allowing the top three to get away. If they can bridge a margin, well, they're home free.
Yeah, Mark Calver doing very well. In third place, we've got a car unfortunately pointing the wrong way. That is the number 95 machine. Let's try and pick out who that is. That is Ollie Ricks, who has unfortunately found himself pointing the wrong way, recovering from an accident as well by the looks of that. Is that number 93 machine? Can't pick out exactly who that is when we look at the timing. But in terms of the best of the starts, obviously those top two have done very, very well indeed. Mark Calver has gone well. Unfortunately, Greg Giles has gone backwards, and it's all go on the exit of Copse Corner. Unfortunately, we've had a couple more cars drop their way down the order, and one of those is Greg Giles. Sorry, mate, I've just spoken about it. He started P3, started on the outside of the second row of the grid, and he's right the way down at the tail end of the order.
Well, it's not what you want to be doing by any stretch of the imagination, but fortunately still quite a way to go in this race. If he's able to sort of recoup himself and nail the strategy, of course, a manager. And the tyre rate is absolutely through the roof, apparently. Obviously adjusted for last season, where drivers were just coming in, stopping for a second. Opportunity for him to work his way back into the points, of course, extended all the way to the top 25.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a long clear of Jamie Peters-Ennis behind at the moment. Colin Dunn not really too far away in sixth place. He's picked up a couple of places from where he started. No, he's exactly where he started, pardon me. He started in sixth place. Gary Preble is up a couple of places in seventh. Then we've got both the Abbotts, Ben and Dan Abbott at the moment. Dan Abbott forwards. We have had a bit of changing further back. Ash Hill has managed to pick off another driver a little bit further down. That's Peter Brett, who started in 27th place. He's up into 13th, but back up to the front. We do have Bobby Simmons at the moment battling away with Nathan Maximan. So there's absolutely nothing between the pair of them. Side by side as we work our way down the Wellington Straight up towards Brooklands, we will go when there's still just about an overlap, but we've just got to wait and see who's going to be later on the brakes. If they use much at all, it'll be a graze on the brakes, try and scrub that extra speed off on the way through. And you can see Bobby Simmons is doing that. A bit of a wobble on the apex that will put him on the outside as we work our way around Luffield, and I don't think it'll go his way. No, Nathan back up the inside, picks up that place, but that has now left vulnerable Bobby Simmons to the car just behind. That's Colin Dunn.
Yeah, and let's see if he's able to pick up the pieces. Not quite able to as of yet. Of course, Bobby Simmons, that reigning champion from last season, and obviously won this race this time last season. So would like to be securing some good points. Looking to go to the left-hand side, going into Copse. It's a very fast corner, even in these KAs, just a slight lift to get it through. He's going to go for the up and under. Of course, Colin Dunn now trying to maximise his run through as well. A little bit wide, it must be said, for Maximin. Could we see Simmons go up the inside through Maggots and Beckett's?
Potentially so. Gary Preble into the pit lane already, but it looks like Bobby Simmons did get the best run coming out of Copse Corner, which has put him for what will be the outside into Maggots. Almost contact between the pair of them. Bobby Simmons works his way through on the brakes. Nathan, did he get through? Potentially so, yes he did. But from going from defence to defence again, he would want to attack back at Bobby Simmons, and he is now side by side. I thought he was under pressure from Colin Dunn, but he got that good run that we mentioned on the exit of Beckett's, and that will keep him all the way in front. Yes, it will by the time we get towards Brooklands. Brooklands. So Bobby Simmons has just got to sit behind Nathan Maximan at the moment. Colin Dunn with the best seats in the house, just watching along. But all of this battling is, as you mentioned, letting that top three escape at the moment. Tom O'Farrell is slowly starting to extend that margin. He's right the way up to 1.6 seconds now clear of Jamie Peters-Ennis. Mark Calver in third. Then we get to this battle of Nathan Maximan and Bobby Simmons, who are side by side, and they're not giving each other much room at all, just enough to keep it on the road. David Evans running very, very wide on the exit of Luffield, somehow managed to keep it on the road, but that's something to bear in mind as well. Track limits, you've got to be careful of those.
You really do. Very easily done to be extended with, especially sort of through Cops, and the exit of Luffield here is a very enticing battle, one that we are very much being entertained by. You can see Simmons still under threat from Maximan. It's a back and forth battle, of course, doing these two absolutely no favours, but giving us plenty to watch. Simmons now going to have the outside as they as wide as he can. Also a fight a little bit further back in the battle for 14th. Evans up now into 14th ahead of Hartley, and well, these guys are definitely giving us a show for a season opener. Apologies for some minor technical difficulties on our part, of course. Behind the scenes, we're frantically trying to get everything sorted, but the racing on track is definitely keeping you guys entertained at home, I'm absolutely sure. Of course, Jack Merrill will just wait for him to accustom himself and get back into the commentary booth with me. Still 52.5 minutes left to go of the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series. Of course, plenty of prizes on offer, and you can see that it means a ton to each and every single one of these drivers. Bobby Simmons, reigning champion, as we've said, fighting tooth and nail with Nathan Maximan once again going into Luffield. Let's see, going to the outside, tries to work his way to the up and under, but not able to on this particular occasion. Maximan able to shut the door in his face. And a three-way fight, as you can see, Colin Dunn now making up the rear end of it. But as we've touched on, momentum in these KAs is vitally important. You know, that exit speed, that entry speed, just the overall speed of the circuit, I suppose, is vitally important. And battling, going side by side, as good as it looks, is not the quickest way through a corner, funnily enough. And all it's doing is allowing that top three to get away and allowing the rest of the pack to close back in. You can now see the two Abbotts in 7th and 8th closing in. Harvey as well, not a million miles off. The more these guys slow themselves down, the harder they're going to work themselves and also their tyres. So come the pit stop phase, there might be a little bit of a disagreement and some interesting developments to be happening there as well, but that's to come in a few moments time. Probably around the halfway point we might see some people heading their way into the pit lane. Colin Dunn, though, just been sat idle, not really had much of a stance in this battle as such, which is weird because you would expect the third car in a 3-car train to maybe mix it up a little bit. And I think this is going to be Dunn's time to shine. He is going to pull to the left. There is going to be a slight little bit of overlap with Bobby Simmons going into Brooklands. And is it going to be hard fought by the reigning champion? Because of course they need to stay in touch with Maximan if they want that 4th place. Both of them very late on the brakes and using the outside momentum. I think a slight bit of contact as Bobby Simmons sails his way to the outside, and I think actually has fallen victim to Colin Dunn. It was a good attempt, but unfortunately didn't end in the way that Simmons would have liked, and Colin Dunn able to finally mix it up with this 3-way fight and into 5th, of course about 3/4 of a second off the 4th place driver of Nathan Maximan, who has been able to perfectly negotiate this battle. Now of course we've got Dan Abbott and Ben Abbott both in behind Simmons, and maybe able to cause a little bit of an upset for the reigning champion, who of course did win this race this time last season, so that experience definitely is there, but it wasn't easy then, and I'm sure it won't be easy now, and you can see just how competitive it is. So just to win one, race last year definitely doesn't mean definitely doesn't guarantee you success this time around. Tom O'Farrell, however, really kicking this season off very, very strong after narrowly missing out on the title by just 10 points this time a year ago, so would like to kickstart his championship campaign in much better stead. David Evans fighting away with Thorns still for 14th place as both the Abbotts swap over their positions in the timing tower, and we touched very briefly on sort of the prize point of this championship. Of course, it's a £30 entry fee. The top three, of course, provided by our beautiful sponsors over at Burton, win themselves a fully funded ARDS test, which is essentially just the UK's racing license qualification that can get you to club level racing in the UK, which I think is worth in the region, just a quick Google search, of about £600. So for 30 quid, if you can finish inside the top three, you are definitely getting your money's worth, and of course can get yourself into that real life motorsport side of things, which sim racing does a really, really good job of, just allowing, you know, the drivers on the sim that are able to prove themselves, you know, the likes of, you know, Jimmy Broadbent, James Baldwin, Chembolic Bassi, who have been able to take that step from sim into the real world. It's a really good platform in order to do that. So these guys will be very much gunning for those positions and to get themselves onto the real stage. Still, this fight, I have to say, is so enthralling. Bobby Simmons now trying to launch a counter-attack on Colin Dunn. He is going to go to the outside of Maggots, but it's going to give him the inside for the following corner, and what a move that could well be from Abbott to just follow that space on the inside, pick his way back through. Dan Abbott as well through. Colin Dunn, 3 places lost in the span of 1 corner, purely because he was on the wrong line going in. That outside line, he was just left to dry, essentially. The 3 that took to his inside, like in a go-kart race, like Jack was saying a little bit earlier on, the space opened up and you are just bullied wide. Dunn, of course, immediately not going to be happy with that and tried to pick up the pieces, launch a counter-attack to the inside of Brooklands. But look at that move, sailing his way is Dan Abbott up back into 7th place, inside for Luffield, and he's actually going to send a move on the fellow Abbott of Ben, the fight for 6th. And Bobby Simmons, of course, going to be loving this just to sort of extend the gap and bridge his way further away, get away from this battle, because it's only going to be doing himself good if he can get away. Abbotts both side by side. Colin Dunn now able to fill the space, make it 3 wide potentially on that run in towards Copse Corner. The inside definitely the most beneficial place to be. Who's going to be the one to back out first? I don't think any of them really want to. Colin Dunn going to be committed as ever around the outside of Copse. Is definitely not an easy move to make, especially in low power front wheel drive machines. It's Colin Dunn that takes that 6th place and basically negates the advantage for the most part of the unfortunate luck that he had this time last lap. There you can see a nice little move there from Ben Abbott to the inside of Dan. Not entirely sure of the relationship there between those two, but there might well be one. Unless it's coincidence, then fair play. But I probably do doubt that to be the case. Either way, they are running really, really nicely. Of course, firmly inside the top 10. As you can see in the top middle of your screen, the pit window is now open until 10 minutes left to go. So from 10 minutes in till 10 minutes to the end, they can pit essentially whenever they want to take their mandatory stop that they do have to take. I do reiterate, they don't necessarily have to take fuel or tyres, but it could be recommended. We could see some drivers reserving themselves at this portion of the race to save those tyres, to limit their amount of time in pit stop by only taking fuel or whatever it might well be, and making those tyres or even the fuel last the full hour. Whether that's possible or not, we'll wait and see how the strategy develops over the course of the season. Toby Owen, by the way, we have been told to give him a shout out alongside our fabulous sponsors for all the hard work he does behind the scenes, and the Abbotts are brothers and both race IRL as well, and well, that IRL experience definitely being translated really nicely into the sim racing world. Colin Dunn still fighting with one of the Abbott brothers to the left-hand side of your screen, the right-hand side of the circuit, and potentially the inside line for the next braking zone. Colin Dunn going to have to go to the left and the long way round, which of course a couple of laps ago saw him 3 places lost. However, this time he's going to be a little bit more argy-bargy, a little bit more aggressive, and keep his foot in the long way round, which is he can do. Really does open up quite nicely that exit onto the Wellington Straight, and has allowed Colin Dunn to keep that 6th place, but in doing so has lost very easily, just in the span of a couple of laps, 2 whole seconds to Bobby Simmons. And moves like this don't help. As beautiful as they might seem, they do not help your overall lap time. Nice little dive to the inside from Abbott, and again, Brooklands as a corner really invites that to happen. The natural racing line is a wide arc in to take an apex to then set yourself up for Luffield, and in doing so you leave a good portion of the circuit on the left for the taking, and that is a circuit that Abbott definitely did take in bucket loads and an Apex that he eventually took on his way into 6th place. Bit of a check-in at the front. You can see Tom O'Farrell leads the way ahead of Jamie Peters-Ennis in second, ahead, of course, of Mark Calvin, Nathan Maximin and Bobby Simmons round off the top 5. 3.8 seconds is the gap at the front for O'Farrell, which is an insane margin to have, especially this early on in the race. Let's just see how that progress tracks forward. Maybe he's using more of his tyres than Peters-Ennis is, and we could well see that P2 driver work his way back into the fray a little bit later on in the race, because while 60 minutes, it's sort of in that middle portion. It's considered a sprint race, but you know, when the settings on AC are turned up a little bit, the tyre wear, the fuel wear, it can actually turn itself really nicely into sort of like a mini endurance race of sorts. And of course, that's what these guys are trying to emulate, and that strategical mind that these drivers have got to have, because sim races, they've got to do pretty much everything in the cockpit. They've got to be their own strategists for the most part, their own setup engineers, and of course they've got to drive them, unless they're sort of part of a bigger organisation in sim racing that have people that do that for them. Once they're in the car, though, they've got to make all these decisions and process a million different things all by themselves, and for the most part they do a very, very good job of that. So let's see how these guys get on with it, if they're hitting their targets in terms of fuel and tyre wear as such. But I think AC, for the most part, of course, it's not a sim that you really see at the top level of sim racing. You typically see its counterpart, Assetto Corsa Competizione with the GT3 side of things. I'm not entirely sure as to how sort of forgiving AC is in terms of its tyres or fuel. It's not a sim that I've particularly driven a heck of a lot, unless there's a really cool mod that I've seen that I want to get into and try. For example, like the EnduroKA, I was like, I want to give them a go. So I booted up my sim a little bit earlier on and was like, I'm going to get in, I'm going to give them a drive, and well, what a ton of fun I did have. Still fighting tooth and nail of these guys. Peter Brett as well on the fringes of a top 10 fighting with Richard Pixley. And of course, the point system rewards all the way down to P25, so it's 50 for a win, down in 2-point increments all the way down, of course, to P25. So points for a vast majority of the field. You want those top 50, and that's what O'Farrell is very much on course to do over the course of the next 42 minutes. I've been told that, of course, Jack has got some very minor technical problems in terms of internet connection, so when he is back in, of course, you'll hear me shut up at least for a few seconds, and you'll have the beautiful voice of Jack back here. But thank you to everyone that is watching back at home, and hope you are enjoying yourself, of course, here on MSVT Racing, or of course those watching over on the Gridfinder YouTube channel as well. Shout out to all of you guys, and of course our beautiful sponsors, Burton. We've got Positive Perception, who have done all the beautiful liveries. Each and every single one of these gorgeous EnduroKAs that you can see out on circuit have all been designed by the hardworking people over there, and of course looking very, very good indeed. On board with Colin Dunn, that's a very slow car on the right. I think a little bit of lap traffic for these guys to contend with, but yet to see any major players work their way into the pit stop. Still fairly uniform inside the top 10. Here's Ollie Ricks a little bit further down, because there are battles to be celebrated, not necessarily for those inside the top 10. I've just been told that Positive Perception, they don't do all of them, I think the vast majority. I think there are a couple of people that have been that wanted to do their own. So the better looking ones, the ones that Positive Perception are, I'm joking. But that's a backwards facing car on the right. Not entirely sure as to who that is, but either way, not the way you want to be facing going into probably the heaviest braking zone on the circuit. We've got Scott Thorne side by side here with Evans. Of course, Thorne able to pick his way up into 13th, a little bit wide, it must be said, from David Evans, who has been fighting fairly hard for that 13th and 14th and 15th. In fairness, I think Evans has been in all three over the course of this race, still scoring some fairly decent points, of course. Tom O'Farrell, by the way, finished 16th here at Silverstone last season, and only missed out on the championship by 10 points. So, just because you have a bad one round doesn't necessarily mean that your whole season is then going to be tainted. But consistency is going to be key. I don't think we've touched necessarily too much on the calendar itself. Of course, we start here at the Silverstone National. In a week's time, we'll head to Donington. 2 weeks after that, we do 2 weeks on and then we take a 2-week break, and then do 2 weeks as such, side by side here, by the way. Ben Abbott with Colin Dunn. This is for 6th. Let's see how these two get on once they decide their scrap into Brooklands, and Colin Dunn is able to settle himself just ahead. But then we'll go to Anglesey on round 3, the Snetterton 300. That's going to be our sort of sprint round as such. 2 30-minute races for round number 4. I'm really looking forward to Snetterton because I live in Norfolk and it's the only circuit I've ever been to in the flesh. So, well, apart from the London E-Prix circuit, but apart from that, that's the one that I go to most regularly, and I love Snetterton. So you'll be definitely seeing me cheer when we get to round number 4, Brands Indy. And then, of course, you guys can have your say on Saturday, the 24th of February for round number 6 for our final round of the season. Should be a lot of fun and a very, very good season indeed, making the most of the UK's wide roster of incredible racing circuits, and obviously those available on AC, which, with thanks to a very vast modding community, you can drive pretty much anything, anywhere, with plenty of people that are passionate enough to make these mods on a Assetto Corsa. Most tracks, most cars, you name it, is probably out there somewhere on this amazing sim, amazing platform. So definitely can't complain. This obviously thanks to that we have these amazing KAs, because I don't really think there's any other platform that has this car. Definitely not this spec. And it has just been confirmed that there is no other platform that has it. So yeah. AC, shout out to you guys for putting this, or the mod, I suppose, for allowing this to happen. It's of course a very good one. You wouldn't really tell that it is sort of a private mod as such, and that is another thing about the modding community in sim racing. Of course, you see, other sims that don't necessarily allow that, but then you have sims like AC that do allow the private modding, and of course you'll have some that aren't the best. But then you get some that, from someone who is doing it by themselves, doesn't have the budget or the capacity, the people power of a big corporation to be able to shell out some really high quality mods that are really realistic and drive like the real thing. Is absolutely insane, and is allowing us, as I said, to have this amazing event, amazing series now for the 2nd year put on for all of these cars to fight for the top 3 prize, of course, of an arts test, to maybe get themselves onto the real world track. Ash Hill fighting with Brett. This is for 11th place. Again, outside the top 10, but still some decent points on offer for them. Side by side as we approach the halfway point in just 7 minutes time. We'll be already halfway through of the race. Side by side, Ash Hill looking to go for the move on Brett. Let's see how this one goes for him. Sailing his way to the outside, and of course a very nice move indeed. He was able to just take that shorter route through Brooklands, and Brett unfortunately was just had to concede and into the pit lane. In fact, actually, just after that, fastest lap being put in by Nathan Maxman in 3rd place, just a 19.2, so even quicker. Or at least matching that of Tom O'Farrell. But we are now starting to see some of the first rounds of pit stops be put in from some of these drivers. So whether they come in, take fuel and tyres, or one or the other, or neither, remains to be seen. But definitely towards that stage of the race, we're really starting to unpack everything and see how things are getting on. Of course, O'Farrell has given himself this freedom, I suppose, with that 5.5 second gap that he's built over the course of the first 23.5 minutes. He's now, as I say, just given himself a little bit of freedom. He's just allowed himself to decide what he wants to do a little bit more, whether he lifts off ever so slightly, saves a bit more fuel before the pit stop window, drives a bit more smoothly to save the tyres. He's got that buffer, that security to use thanks to his driving side by side. This is the fight for the top 10, top 9 in fact, actually. Pixley versus Harvey, and then also Dan Abbott just ahead in that fight for 8th. Let's see. No way through for Harvey as of yet, and this is maybe where you start to think, as a driver, do you stay in this fight, or do you come in just a lap earlier, have a couple of laps in clear air, and maybe try and get that undercut as such? Or is there such an importance on the slipstream, because of obviously Silverstone National, such a long circuit focused on not necessarily a long circuit, but long straights as such that run from Woodcut to Copse, and then of course from Max Beckett's into into Brooklands to Wellington Straight, a lot of it spent flat out. Is there such a high precedence on slipstream that you can't pull yourself into the pit lane to have a couple laps by yourself? Dan Abbott fighting his way with Pixley, who's going to go to the outside for the first part, gives him the inside for the second. Let's see what Abbott's stance is, whether it's a up and under to hit a later apex and drive his way back alongside. Very easy to do, as you can see Pixley just running ever so slightly wide. And they are going to run two abreast, with Harvey, of course, just sat idle, waiting for his chance maybe to bring himself back into the fight. Not really much separating them at all, barely making out a gap between the pair of them. So close to contact. In the end, it's Dan Abbott that takes to the outside, going into Brooklands. Is Pickley going to claim the corner and take that inside? Indeed he is, and take that 8th place. Very nicely done indeed, and moves his way quite smoothly into 8th place. Great respect, it must be said, given to these drivers. And that's what we like to see, is that mutual respect given. There's been sort of such a mentality of inside is the corner's now mine as such, and if you're on the outside, then you either back out or you're going to be in the barrier or on the grass or whatever. But it's great to see that these guys, of course, have that respect for each other to allow themselves to race, to run side by side and not take that stubborn approach of aggressiveness where you just take the inside, you take the apex, and you don't really care about anything else that's on around you as long as you've got the inside and you can declare yourself a right of way. These guys just race really nicely, even through the difficult no overtaking zones of the likes of Copse and Maggots and Beckett's as such. They do give an extra bit of margin, and some great racing has been on display for the first half of this round. David Edwards, of course, to the inside. He's fighting away with Hartley. This is for 18th place. Of course, the field has spread out as such, thanks to incidents and battles and things, but we have got our little pockets of things, particularly this one. Pixley versus Abbott still on this run towards Brooklands. This is really where we've seen the vast majority of the action, and understandably so. It's a braking zone off the back of quite a long straight. You can race quite well, and of course the complex itself, Brooklands into Luffield. That left and that right, Nathan Maximin into the pit lane from 3rd place. Of course, recently did momentarily set the fast lap, a 19.252, which is only about 8 thousandths of a second slower than Tom O'Farrell. So a very good lap time indeed, and looking strong for a podium potentially. Let's see what Nathan Maximin can do from this point onwards. Tom O'Farrell able to extend that gap to 6.5 seconds ahead of Jamie Peter Ennis. So again, looking very, very strong in his fight for the lead. The only enemy to himself at the moment is himself. He's got to be so careful not to get complacent, but there is Nathan Maximin now leaving the pit lane and emerging just on the exit of Copse. Got to be really, really careful, because those cars are not going to be coming by very slowly at all. So do be mindful about your re-entry, because like I said a little bit earlier on, actually, I was driving these cars going into Copse as Maximin just rejoins ahead of Parsons, but I think he's going to settle into 15th, avoiding much contact there. But Copse is a fast corner, even in sort of these low downforce KAs. Just a slight lift, maybe even taken flat out if you just about get it right, but I think you just need a little bit of a safety lift. So they are running, towards the higher end of sort of the mid-range of 4th gear of sort of their power band, which is astonishing that such a little car can take such a fast corner as fast as it does. Nathan Maximin fighting away with Parsons. This is for 14th. Of course, he's just emerged from the pit lane and wants to be making the most about this portion of the race, because this could be the turning point that sees him close that gap to the top 2 or maintains his place potentially on that podium. He doesn't really want to spend much of it fighting away with Parsons if he can help it, but rather just get ahead and get on with things as such. So Maxim showcasing, as we say, some really, really nice pace indeed. A couple more people into the pit lane as well. You can see Evans in, and Maximin still under pressure, it must be said. I mean, I have to say, Tim Parsons has been giving him a decent run for his money. He stayed quite close to the rear end of Maximin for a decent portion of this first lap that they've been together. Parsons is going to launch a bit of a counter-attack, but how beneficial is it going to be for him to fight? Because, of course, at some point, Maximin is going to get away, and I think that moment is now. Bit of a rivalry forming, it must be said, between Richard Pixley and Dan Abbott. Of course, at some point, Abbott was fighting for P4 with the likes of Bobby Simmons and Colin Dunn, and, of course, his brother of Ben Abbott, now in 6th, but that fight itself has fizzled out as time has gone on. We've seen, and there you can see we've finally seen a gorgeous pink, vibrant pink. There's still a decent portion of it with white, but they're racing stripes, so it gets away. The racing stripes in of itself add 5 horsepower. The vibrant pink adds another 5. So a very, very strong car indeed, driven by James Armstrong, and a very beautiful pink, it must be said. And of course, fielding all the lovely sponsors on the side as well. But yeah, asking you shall receive there in the YouTube chat. We always love a pink car, of course, fielded usually by the likes of Arnage Competition, and looking very beautiful. And I can't bring up Arnage without saying about Brabham Esports, and Wild Things, of course. And I can't say about Arnage without bringing up without Brabham, because Mike Yao would probably have to go at me if I didn't. So Brabham Esports as well, have a bit of a shout out. We've got Dan Abbott still with Richard Pixley and Rocket as well. Rocket Sim Sport, a bit of a shout out to them. So many of them, and so many. Still this battle happening with Pixley and Abbott. Nose to tail. We are now into the second half of this race, by the way. I think Pixley has peeled his way off into the pit lane. Dan Abbott now released for 7th. When are we going to start to see the rest of the front lot coming? I mean, you can see there Calvert in from 4th. Where will he emerge? James Harvey as well, fighting with Ash Hill. They're going to overtake Richard Pixley in the pit lane. Does the space open up on the right-hand side? Not quite. Yeah, these guys definitely showcasing their talent. And if they are able to take the top 3 steps in the championship, as I say, they get themselves a fully funded ARDS license test. And if they, of course, pass that, then they can get themselves onto the UK motorsport scene and drive in the real world, which is, of course, a different kettle of fish. But that transition is a really nice one indeed. Of course, a lot of you at home might not really be that familiar with the side of sim racing. You might only be in sort of the real life motorsport fashion. And if this is your first time seeing a sim race, then of course welcome into the scene, because it is a very, very good one indeed. Puts on a lot of very nice racing like this one. James Harvey looking to go the long way around at Brooklands if he can. Not quite able to, I don't think, on this particular occasion, or he might well give it a go. But that transition, sort of the link between the two, you know, unlike any other sport really, that transition sort of from you know, the comparison of say FC24 to real life football, it's a controller to, you know, sprinting around a field for 90 minutes, whereas sim racing in of itself, you're, you know, with the steering wheel, you're with your pedals, you get that force feedback, and you translate into the real world, because you're doing essentially the same thing. You're turning a wheel, you're pushing some pedals, and of course, in essence, you gain a lot as well. You gain that feeling with G-forces and wind, and you feel the temperature and conditions of the car as well. So there's a huge gain from sim to real life. So of course, that's going to be a transition that these guys will feel in bucketloads, and a very interesting one of that. I have just been told, by the way, that talking about their ARDS UK race license and things, the top 3 from last year in the championship, Bobby Simmons, Tommy Farrell, Jack Mace, well done to them. All took their, of course, their reward of their ARDS test, and all of them were able to get their licenses at the end of it. So it is possible, it can be done, and very good use of their prize. So of course, if any of those 3 finish again inside the top 3 in this championship, they can substitute their prize to someone else, whether it's sort of in the championship or elsewhere or whatever. So there is still a chance, if you are outside the top 3, that you can still get your sort of that funded prize as such. So never give up. Just hope that you make friends with the people inside the top 3, I suppose. So if you see Tom O'Farrell doing well, of course he's already got his, so you know, maybe start nudging up to him, hopefully, if you don't finish inside the top 3 to get your ARDS license. James Harvey fighting with Ash Hill. This is the fight for 7th place. Let's see if you can go to the outside of Cop's corner. 26 minutes left to go in this race, so definitely feeling it in terms of the tyres, driving these cars phenomenally hard and burning a lot of fuel as well. We've touched on the fact that you spend a lot of time on the straight, of course, trying to rag these small little 1.3 litre cars as fast as they can go, burning quite a lot of fuel, and especially out of the acceleration zones, obviously here onto the Wellington Straight and out of Luffield and off the exit Cops, you'll be burning quite a little bit of fuel. And the demands, quite long corners, Brooklands, Luffield, Cops corner, Maggots, straining a lot of the tyres. So you will start to feel it, especially if you're driving on the limit, especially if you're driving as fast as Tom O'Farrell is out in front and battling away as hard as these two are as well. Ash Hill has to go to the outside of James Harvey. And while it was a good look, that outside momentum really does prevail on that run into Brooklands. And if you haven't really got a significant overlap going into Brooklands, it is hard to actually get that move done on the inside. It is a fairly easy job to just, drift the car. Not necessarily drift, because you don't really want to be sideways in these KAs, because that would completely cane your momentum, but just really use the agility of this lightweight KA to drive the car quite smoothly with that momentum, and just in effect almost just take a normal racing line around the outside of someone. You can, because it gets to a point where they're not alongside enough and will probably just back out of the corner anyway. So even if there is a driver on your inside going into that corner, still keep firm on the outside. It is still very possible, and if you can stay there, you'll have the inside for Luffield anyway. So worth doing, and a very mighty defence, it has to be said, from Ash Hill. Still got 14.5 minutes left to go of the pit window, by the way. So it might still be a while till we see each and every single one of these drivers tick off their mandatory stop. We've got Calver on the inside of the pink machine, the absolute unit that is James Armstrong, in 9th place now. He's gone for an up and under and battling away quite nicely. Of course, Calver has taken his mandatory pit stop, so would like to be getting on with things more than anything, but he's going to pull back to the left-hand side. James Armstrong going to fight to the outside of Brooklands. They've also got Nathan Maximin now back into the mix. That could well be a fight for the podium in a few moments' time. Of course, Maximin and Calver both taking their mandatory stops. James Armstrong just in between them at the moment, making up a very nice pink sandwich. Not entirely sure how tasty that would be. Probably not very. But Calver running really nicely. A good overtake, and I think an important one as well if he wants to get out of the range of Nathan Maximin, because Maximin, as we saw towards the back end of his stint, put in some mightily quick lap times. Just going to compare the two. Actually, we've got of course Mark Calver, his quickest lap time is a 19.5, and then you've got Nathan Maximin a 19.2, so a good 3/10 difference between the pair of them in terms of fastest lap time. So Calver will know that Maximin has got the pace beneath him and would rather keep that pace behind him as opposed to running away out in front of him. And if he can have James Armstrong separating them, then even better. All he has to do is not allow Armstrong to launch a counter-attack on himself. Of course, that would be less than ideal. He is going to take a semi-defensive line going down the Wellington Straight, but he's going to return to the normal racing line, because here is Maximin putting a bit of pressure onto James Armstrong. It is going to be the left, and he's going to be ahead before the braking zone even. Tucks just nicely ahead of James Armstrong, and now it's fair game in that fight for 8th place between both Calver and Maximin. Of course, they have got a number of drivers that are yet to take their stop. I think both Abbotts, Hill, Harvey, Fralin, Peter Zennis, I think, are all yet to take their mandatory stops. I think Simmons has done. I would imagine so. He went from 5th to 7th, or potentially not yet. So, of course, we'll wait and see answers to all of these questions to come over the course of the next 12 minutes. We've got James Harvey trying to put some pressure on to Ash Hill. This is the fight for the top 5 as it stands, but I think in the end is going to have to back out of that one. In fact, actually commit even deeper going into the corner. The outside line, though, for Ash Hill, you can see that momentum that we're talking about, just to drive the car, use the agility. As the track opens up, just sail your way through, and it gives you at least a fighting chance to the inside at Brooklands. A very vast gap between the pair of them, but I think Ash Hill is able to bring his way back to the right-hand side going into Brooklands and take that race line. So a good attempt from Harvey, but unfortunately not quite good enough to see him up ahead and into 5th place. Although you can definitely tell, I think, that Harvey is the quicker of the two drivers. At least at this stage. Again, with slipstream and such, it can very easily change, as James Harvey, actually, speaking of, comes into the pit lane to take his mandatory stop with just over 20 minutes left to go. Tom O'Farrell as well from the lead of the race into the pit lane on this lap as well. So Jamie Peter Ennis is free to continue now to inherit the lead for the first time in this race, other than momentarily, I think, edging himself ahead of O'Farrell at the start. But there he is, at least a partially pink machine. The pink and the baby blue looking very colourful at least. And some nice patterns on the side of the car as well. So some really, really nice liveries, it must be said. These cars are very well looked after, of course, the vast majority of them done by our amazing sponsors of Positive Perception. Definitely do go check them out if you fancy livery. Taking a nice wide line, I think under blue flags, one of those cars. So again, respecting that area of the rules, just giving these guys a nice wide berth to continue their run and not get in the way as such, which is, you know, great respect. Again, the etiquette on track is really nice from these guys who have done plenty of sim racing and real world racing. Of course, we talked about the two Abbotts, and of course the top three who are now able to take to the real life UK circuits. You know, they might have that real life experience, that racecraft to call back on in the sim, and you know, just the etiquette of, you know, if you are not really in the race, then just do everyone a favour and, you know, take a nice wide berth, allow them through. Just that gentleman's agreement, I suppose, more than anything. Here's Mark Calver, though, still on the back of Nathan Maximin. Of course, Maximin was able to find his way past, after the pair of them found their way past James Armstrong for what at the time, of course, was 7th place. James Armstrong now down to 9th. O'Farrell, by the way, took his pit stop and still emerged in 3rd place. Didn't really take that long of a stop, so it just goes to show how good of a stint he had in the opening moments to emerge in 3rd place. So probably didn't take that long in terms of his stationary lap time. Of course, the national pit lane not as long as the Grand Prix, and you won't be losing that much time relative in that regard. But even then, you know, to take tyres and to potentially take fuel as well. So yeah, would have added a good few seconds for O'Farrell's lap time. Have just been told that unfortunately Jack O'Farrell has had a mighty issue, a local outage for his internet provider, which is of course unfortunate. But these technical difficulties unfortunately can't be helped. So you've just had me waffling on for sort of the last majority of the race up till now. We've got 18 minutes left to go. So still plenty of racing, and the two Abbotts lead 1 and 2, taking this very, very long into the race. 8 minutes until that mandatory pit stop gets the window gets shut off. So of course the two Abbotts need to start to be thinking about their pit stop time soon. But if they do take tyres or even, you know, fuel, they won't have much time to use those fresh tyres as such, if they do decide to take them. And of course with fuel, I mean, that would benefit them. They've got less to put back into the car to get to the end, so that would be an advantage in that regard. But where will they emerge? Side by side here, by the way, we've got Maximin versus Calver. It's been a fight that's been brewing for quite some time, and it's going to be the counter-attack now after a couple of laps from Mark Calver, who's going to pull to the right-hand side, the outside, of course, through Brooklands, which we have touched on as being a workable move. He's going to have the edge by the time they reach the apex. I think a little bit of understeer might hamper his run. Side by side still, Maximin just edges himself ahead. Now the outside for Luffield, but Calver is going to keep firm and hold that inside line and hold, more crucially, that 7th place in this race as well. But the up and under look there for Nathan Maximin. I don't think this fight is far from done, because side by side through Woodcote, it's now the inside line for Maximin, who's going to try and take over that 7th place once more. And it was a mighty attack from Calver. Can he keep it up through Copse? Is he going to go the long way around? Is he going to try and set for the up and under? It's going to be neither, because Maximin, with that amazing run, the exit of Luffield, able to keep him ahead of Calvin for now. Colin Dunn, unfortunately down in 14th place. We saw him fighting inside the top 5 earlier. Still, again, scoring some decent points. So, as I say, extended all the way down to 25th. So, as I said earlier, 50 points in for first, and then 2-point increments all the way down. So the vast majority of the field do in fact get themselves some points taken to the grid today. We've got 29 raceable cars. Of course, we've got a couple of others in the session, the likes of Mark Bradbury in the safety car, and a couple of broadcasts. So the entries were 29, so only 4 people aren't going to be scoring themselves some points. which I think should keep this a nice and entertaining season throughout. As I said, I mean, Tom O'Farrell was able to finish just 10 points off, so effectively 5 positions over the course of the season. The championship winner of Bobby Simmons in the end, and he finished 16th at Silverstone. So, you know, you can afford to maybe have an off week. It's just how you bounce back and amend that. I mean, just looking at the other results for the two in contention for the championship, I mean, over the course of the 6-round season, Tom O'Farrell won 3 of them, Bobby Simmons won 2. However, it was the consistent run from Simmons, a second, 2 wins and 2 thirds, that were able to seal in the deal. His worst round was at Snetterton, which was a 6th place, which is a very respectable bad week. But Tom O'Farrell, despite that, I mean, a 4th and a 16th and a 7th were his worst weeks, but he was able to bounce back on that and finish a really strong double win to round off the season. So again, you will have bad weeks. You will have weeks where you're not necessarily on the pace, but it's how you manage that. And take the example of Bobby Simmons. He wasn't on the podium. He was only just outside the top 5, showcasing a huge level of talent, and one that's very worthy, of course, of taking that ARS license test that these guys, of course, will all be raring for. Now the Abbotts, meanwhile, while I was talking about that, actually both come into the pit lane. Ash Hill now inherits 2nd place. Tom O'Farrell re-inherits his race lead that he's been keeping for the entirety of it. You can see the black, orange, and the blue. I have to say that is probably one of my favourite liveries, I suppose, on the grid. I think it is especially the from the side, the black and the blue look mighty. And his driving has been able to match the amazing colour scheme on his car and the amazing look on his car as well. He's just been a mega driver all the way through. James Armstrong, of course, another fan favourite livery in the pink with the racing stripes, fighting away with Evans for 15th. Let's see side by side. Armstrong now looking to go the right hand side. It'll be the inside for the next braking zone again if he's able to keep it there. It's a very easy corner to lock up on, actually. It was one that maybe it's just a skill issue, maybe I'm just bad, but going in, if you want to sort of you want to brake quite harshly in these cars, yeah, very easy to just to lock up the wheels and go straight on. But of course these guys are a lot better than I am, so they're able to keep it nicely under wraps going into the corner, take a nice apex and bring the car in quite nicely, because again, it's a low power car. You've got to keep that minimum speed up. You don't want to be slowing down too much, because it's going to be really, really hard to get that car back up to the speed that it was once at. And especially at a circuit like Silverstone National, that's something that you really cannot afford to have. 2 minutes 40 left of the pit window, so we probably are most of the way done with those that have got to take their stop. Ash Hill most recently in from 2nd, now rejoins in 7th. And we're starting to piece together the real running order of this race at this point. Because sort of in that middle portion of the race, sort of with 20 minutes to go as such, there are people that haven't done it, people that have, and a bit mismatched and mangled over the course of it. So it's only now that you really start to piece together where people are after the strategical sort of decisions have taken place. And of course, with no surprise, it was Tom O'Farrell that was able to make the most of it. I mean, in fairness, I mean, Peter Zennis has done a decent job of maintaining that gap. It's only not really been able to grow much. In fact, on that last lap, a 19.8 for Peter Zennis and a 19.9 for Tom O'Farrell. So Peter Zennis, if he was able to maintain this competitiveness to O'Farrell at the start of the race, we might have a different story entirely in terms of that fight for the lead. However, we've got a beautiful three-way fight here for 11th. We've got Harvey, Brett, and Dunn on the fringes of the top 10. Of course, they've got Ricks that is a few seconds up the road, but side by side nonetheless. You can see Brett just trying to shorten the run. I think Harvey was anticipating a move, so just sort of kept it nice and wide through Woodcote just to allow the space to happen, just to take quite a cautious approach. Now Colin Dunn, what's his stance going to be? He's going to take, of course, the normal racing line, carry as much speed as he can, and might well be able to spark a move for 11th place Ollie Ricks. In fact, actually, this is now a fight for the top 10, because Ricks is into the pit lane to take his stop. So now the stakes have just grown a little bit more. Now Colin Dunn able to move his way past into 11th, and let's see if he's able to nail the exit of this corner that precedes the Wellington Straight. He might well be able to have a go at Brett in the near future as well. But a counter-attack potentially from Harvey, and also this fight still between Hill and Pixley, 8th and 9th between the pair of them. the green and yellow of Hill that takes up the inside. Picture in picture, as you can see, two fantastic battles running their way into a fantastic complex side by side. You can see on the left-hand side between Hill and Pixley, it's going to be Pixley on the right, and he's going to be able to pick his way through quite nicely. Hill, of course, the long way round and trying to keep his foot in side by side between the pair of them on the right as well as they run their way through Luffield, but it is going to be Harvey that stays ahead of Colin Dunn in that fight for 10th place. Back to just one battle. 10 minutes left to go. The pit window is now closed, and we are into that final sprint to the finish side by side on that run in towards Copse Corner. Let's see what Ash Hill can do if he's able to keep the car pinned. He's not. He brings it back to the racing line and just settles in behind Richard Pixley for now. They've got a little bit of a gap to Dan Abbott, 3 seconds. A closable gap, but I think they're going to settle in for their own respective fight, not worry too much about closing, and accept their ceiling in this race at 8th place and fight amongst themselves. We've got Colin Dunn still with Harvey. This is the fight for 11th. Back to picture in picture because they're both going side by side. It's done around the outside of Maggots, allowing Harvey to get away, but a fantastic battle. Brett, sorry, to get away, but a fantastic battle with Harvey. And on the left, you can see Hill and Pixley, half a tenth separate them. Into Brooklands once more. It's Hill once again. Well, this time actually on the outside, so it's roles reverse. Let's see if he can do just as good a job on the other side of the circuit. He's not. Richard Pixley finds his way through. In fact, goes a little bit too tight on the apex and finds himself once again behind, but he's going to launch immediately a counter-attack. Emerging from Luffield side by side once more, so the battle rages on between the pair of them, not giving an inch by any means, extending the gap ahead. Of course, they're sort of in a no man's land at this point, just suspended between 7th and 10th. So free to race, essentially, with no risk of losing further positions. Oh, a little bit of argy-bargy as Ash Hill tries to go the long way around, tries to turn a little bit too early, but he found Richard Pixley on his right-hand side. In the end, it's going to be Ash Hill that's forced to concede in that battle, but I'm sure it's far from over. Of course, after the race, we'll have a word with our top 3, which, as it stands, are Tom O'Farrell, Jamie Peters-Ennis and Bobby Simmons. However, Ben Abbott less than a second off that fight for the podium, so we'll wait and see who we're going to be talking to after the race. Would be nice to have a word with them, actually, just to sort of see their thoughts and feelings going into the new season. And Farrell, of course, kickstarting the season off quite nicely, and while he can't claim the prizes, he's already gotten one. I'm sure he'll still want the glory of another Enduro Witness Sim Series top 3, whether that's the championship or just settling inside the top 3. I think he firmly has got a good chance of going for it based on his results in round number 1. But 5 more rounds to go, 6 more races, of course, 2 at Snetterton come over the course of the next couple of months. There is, of course, Ben Abbott on the back of reigning champion Bobby Simmons, who I have to say has done a really impressive race. The consistency and just the determination to get through this, of course, didn't start, sort of overly well. It was a P5 for him in the end, so decent, but not pole position, not on the front row or front 2 rows as such. So definitely expected better, but just a tentative start, really, just allowing the race to come to him, knowing his strategy was good, knowing his pace was decent. He's now been able to put himself into a position of a potential podium if he's able to fight off Ben Abbott, who himself, again, I have to say, has driven a phenomenally good race. Well, starting from 8th place, he's worked his way with a couple more overtakes, and again, that initial stage of the race where he was fighting away with Dunn, his brother, and of course Simmons, quite early on in the race, he was having a really, really good battle with them. Just great consistency, great racecraft as well, and one that, of course, these guys will know from their real-life endeavours. Of course, the Abbott brothers racing IRL, they know what it takes to do well in a championship over the course of the grueling nature of fighting for a championship, the consistency that's needed, and also just a little bit of luck as well. That's an ingredient that people often forget. Just having a chat actually on another broadcast the other day, talking about what it takes to be a champion, that consistency, cutthroat, going for a move when it counts, and pace and things, but people often forget that it does take a little bit of luck to get there as well. chances are you're not really going to have a perfect season, but if you can just have a little bit of luck sprinkled in there, be in the right place at the right time to see yourself onto a podium or get that extra position that could be the points that swing the scales in your way, and it is a vital factor to have. But of course, you do make your own luck, and you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So if you are given these opportunities, you've also got to be good enough to be able to capitalize on them as well. So while some things are a gift, it's whether or not you actually accept that and use your skills to best make use of it. 5 minutes left to go in this race, by the way. So hopefully 5 minutes of racing action between Simmons and Abbott. Of course, the milestone that is a podium for the first round will be huge morale going forward in the championship, as well as just good points. Of course, an extra 2 points for the extra place, so of course that helps. But also there's certain milestones in a race. Of course, for some, finishing, getting to the end of the hour is the first step. Then you might be thinking, all right, well, I want some points, and in that case that's the top 25. Then you might be thinking, oh, all right, if you're sort of on the lesser experienced side of things, you might want to aim for a top 20, top 15, top 10's then sort of the next big one. Then you get a top 5, then it's a podium, then of course everyone wants to win. Podium, 4th or 5th doesn't really matter, it's still a top 5 at the end of the day, but to then be fighting for a podium place, to finish inside that top 3, just has its own sort of level of glory, that own prestige that gives you that boost going into the next few rounds. Of course, we'll be at Donington in a week's time. Before then, and in 2 weeks we head to Anglesey to round off the first half of the season in terms of rounds. So to use each round as a stepping stone, I mean, look at sort of the end of the season that Tom O'Farrell had a year ago as such. Of course, he took that win at Snetterton, had a bit of a dip at Alton Park, but then Brands Indy to Laguna Seca, that end of the season, he used one round as a stepping stone into the next, rode that wave of confidence, that wave of pace and just a sort of, I suppose, still riding the wave of adrenaline in a case. I mean, just using the winning spirit, the motivation to then go into the next round and do equally as well. It can sort of gain you, not necessarily raw pace, but just focus, and you doubt yourself less. You're less prone to mistakes if you're able to ride that wave going into the coming rounds, because the mental side of things, both in sim and in real life racing, I'm sure it is one that can take precedence. If I suppose for anything really, the mental sort of stance of a driver, an athlete, or a competitor. If you're down in the slums and you're off the back of a bad finish, particularly sort of at the start of a season, if you're aiming for a championship and you're only able to muster up 15th place, that is going to affect you. He's going to have a bit of a look. Is Ben Abbott to the inside of Luffield, not quite able to make it through, and wants that podium, wants that extra bonus of confidence going into the next couple of rounds. With 2 minutes 20 left to go, I think this is going to be the penultimate lap of the race. Tom O'Farrell leads at the 43rd lap. Ben Abbott now showing his intentions, wanting that podium desperately. Let's see if we can have a barnstorming finish to what has been an amazing 60 minutes of Silverstone. They both lapped the car, of course, on the left. Abbott wanting to stay as close as possible to Simmons, who is now going to start to feel the pressure. Just, 1 2/3 lap left to go. Not long. And what's already being an incredible display of EnduroKA action. 1 minute 45 left on the clock. A little bit of a look from Abbott there, just taking a slightly tighter line initially before running wide. Now with the slipstream, let's see what he can do on that run towards Brooklands. Is Simmons going to defend? He's going to ever so slightly move it over, but bring it back to the right, I think, in the end. Not really close enough for an attack. However, there he is, pulling up to the left-hand side. Simmons goes to defend. Now they're going to be weaving all over the track. It's going to be Abbott that now commits to the long way around. Simmons gives him the squeeze, goes in quite deep and carries that speed through, defending this P3 with all of his might. Now 1 lap left to go here at Silverstone. O'Farrell and Peters Ennis seem fairly comfortable in their respective positions, but it's this fight here that we're going to keep our eyes on. Simmons, is he going to be able to defend? Abbott, is there going to be the gap, the opportunity for him to attack? He's been toying with the idea for the last couple of laps now. With 1 to go, who is it going to be for the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series of 2024? To the left, Simmons has to defend into Copse Corner. Abbott, is he going to have the measure going through? He's going to back out initially. Simmons takes the reins and parks it quite nicely on the apex, but the overlap is still there. Abbott very, very nicely brings his way back to the right-hand side of the circuit. It's going to be the inside for the next braking zone, but the run's not quite there, not quite good enough. Now Bobby Simmons going to hold defensive, trying to sell him the dummy is Ben Abbott. He's going to commit to the left though. Who's going to be the one to come out on top in this particular scrap? 25 seconds left on the clock. Tom O'Farrell, of course, will lead us across the line. But really, one more opportunity, one more good go for Ben Abbott. He has to give it absolutely everything going into Brooklands. There, of course, is our race leader. As you can see in the right-hand side of your screen, he's going through Brooklands. And Luffield now will see him across the line to celebrate his dominant victory here at Silverstone. Simmons defensive to the right-hand side of the circuit goes Ben Abbott. But on the run to the line, through Woodcock Corner for the final time is going to be this man right here, Tom O'Farrell. It was 16th place this time last season. He's going to gain 15 from pole to flag. The EnduroKA Winter Sim Series round number 1 goes the way of the runner-up of last season, Tom Farrell. Oh, wait, hang on. We're going to get one more, I think, across the line. No, it's not. It's the checkered flag. Bit of confusion, but Tom O'Farrell takes the victory of the first round here. And who's it going to be for the podium? It's going to be Simmons across the line fighting with Ben Abbott. And in the end, it's going to be Simmons that takes the final place of the podium, just ahead of Abbott for 4th. Very, very hard-fought fight in that regard. Sorry for a little bit of confusion there. I think maybe the timing was ever so slightly off for some of us in the production booth, but thankfully the scare was avoided. That would have been quite unfortunate for O'Farrell if he was to cross the line and then realise he has one more left to go, but fortunately the checker flag was waved at the end of the clock in the top middle, but a very, very good fight, it must be said, for Tom O'Farrell. Peter Zennis, I have to say, he had quite a quiet race. He didn't really do much as such. He just drove well, and in the end actually was able to close the gap to O'Farrell by a decent margin. I think in the end was running about 0.3 of a second quicker than O'Farrell, sort of in that final few moments. And as I said, I think it was able to close the gap in the end to about 3.5, 4-ish seconds, so gaining a decent amount of time. And so when we get a moment, and then of course we'll have a word with the top 3, of course, of O'Farrell, Peter Zennis and Bobby Simmons. Two drivers that finished inside the top 3 of last season, inside the top 3 of the first round of this one. So it would be lovely to have a word with them, of course. And the one we're missing, of course, is Jack Mace, but he's not here for this season, to the best of my understanding. So he physically couldn't finish on the podium, and that's why, of course, we had Peter Zennis come in and fill that spot. But a very, very good race all in all. 60 minutes of racing action, of course. And I do hope each and every single one of you at home did enjoy that. And to start, we'll start right at the very top. We've got Mr. Tom O'Farrell in the commentary booth with me. Tom, I have to say, it was a mighty race. We didn't see much of you, in fairness, because you were just so far out in front.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, boring race. That's all right.
Yeah, it's yeah. To be honest, starting this season like we finished last, so I'm happy with that. Yeah, take the win. I'm over the moon at that. That's yeah, fantastic way to start.
Yeah, and of course, technically you are. That is your 3rd win, I suppose, in a row. You finished the season last with Brands Hatch Indy and Laguna Seca both in your pocket, so not a bad way at all to kickstart this championship campaign. But yeah, I mean, it's been a while since you've been at the wheel of a car, I presume, at sort of a competitive level. Is it a difficult car to settle back into the rhythm of?
Yes and no, to be fair. I mean, it's kind of helped the fact that I work for PASR, who've been running the JSCC official E-Series. Now, it's a very similar Saxo to the KA. It's very similar. It's just you drive the Saxo very aggressively, whereas this you kind of a bit calm and precise with your movements. So it's a relatively similar power to weight ratio, but it's just drive this very smooth, whereas Saxo is just drive it aggressively. So that's basically where it's. I've not done any racing since, well, competitively since the last round at Laguna Seca. So yeah, to come out with a win again and have Jamie and follow me across the line as well. So it's fantastic, really.
And in terms of sort of the strategy, of course, there's been a couple of changes in regards to the fuel and tyre wear compared to last season. Is it a noticeable difference? What's sort of your mentality? Is it drive the car hard, swap the tyres in the pit lane, or is it more of a conservative approach?
So I did a test during the week, and I went, well, I think I'm going to need to change tyres. Then about midway through this race, I went, you know what, tyre wear is actually less than when I practiced. So to be fair, it was all up in the air. I wasn't sure if I had a nice gap. I'd worked out the pit stop and everything. If I had a nice gap, I probably would have changed tyres, because at the end, I was probably about half a second slower each lap than when I was on fresh tyres and a higher fuel load at the start. So yeah, that kind of does go a bit through your head, but it's just trying to work it out as you're racing along. Which obviously, if you're in the pack, it's a bit harder. But when there's nothing going on at the front, it's it's the only thing to concentrate on, really.
Yeah, nice luxury to have, and I think it's good. Probably a good thing to have something to concentrate on when there's nothing else. Otherwise, you just probably settle into a rhythm, start daydreaming as such, and I suppose that's when mistakes can happen. But of course, we go to a variety of circuits. I'm sure the strategy probably will change. You know, when we head to Donington in a week's time, are you excited about that? What's your maybe the highlight of this season going to be for you in terms of the tracks?
Well, this is the one I was most not looking forward to because of what happened last year. Starting on pole, didn't turn my wheel on, and ended up starting from the pit lane and having to work my way back through. So I didn't enjoy last year, but now I've enjoyed this one. So from now on, it's fun. I mean, I'm here to go for your title, Bobby. I'm sorry, but
Fighting words.
yeah, but it's got to be done. I must admit, I feel a bit. I let myself down last year. There was too many issues, too many errors on my side. So I'm starting off, and I want to take the title. So
Awesome. Well, that's great motivation to have. Obviously, some people might be down in the dumps about letting themselves down for the last season, but it seems you're firmly motivated to take back the reins and maybe tip the scale ahead of Bobby Simmons. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us, and once again, a very big congratulations on starting the season off in a win. I'm sure we'll see you back on the podium in a week's time when we head to Donny.
perfect. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Tom O'Farrell, of course, taking that win from pole position here in Silverstone, righting the wrongs of this time a year ago. We'll take a chat with second place, Jamie Peters-Ennis, who had a bit of a quiet race, but in the end, the pace to Tom wasn't all that bad. Seemed to be a fairly decent race from your part to take home a second place.
Yeah, I was just having a chat with Bobby, and from my point of view, it was actually quite a boring race. I mean, Tom and I spoke. We weren't at the beginning. We weren't going to sort of fight each other to try and get a gap. But then I had a huge slide at Brooklands, and as you know, in these things, once you lose the toe, that's it. It's so hard to get it back. And even passing the back markers, I mean, everyone drove fantastically. I mean, even passing, I think it was Tom Selden. I think I struggled to get past him because he was actually quicker than me in a straight line, and he was 24th. But of course, they're all doing their own race, battling, and of course, Tom, Bobby, and I don't want to get involved in their scraps trying to come through.
But all in all, as you say, it's just a boring race. I think you were just sort of there, I guess, just not quite close enough to challenge Tom, but far enough away that you were really out of the danger zone from behind. So you were just sort of driving, but all in all, a really consistent start to the season. Of course, looking forward, what are your aspirations? Are you looking to keep up this amazing run of form?
It'd be nice. I learned a lot last year, as Jack will tell you. I mean, I was quite famed for lunges and dive bombing and things like that. You're not going to see any of that this year. I'm going to be a lot calmer. I'm now going to be dubbing the car as the flying lava lamp rather than the flying rainbow.
Nice.
So I thought go for a completely new look this year. Still got the Pride representation on it, which is obviously very important for inclusivity. But yeah, it'd be good to keep the momentum up and just now figure out how to drive these things. Try and get one over on Tom on the next one.
Nice, of course, yeah, we head to Donington. What is maybe going to be the track or the round that you're most looking forward to over the course of the next few weeks?
Alton Park is probably my strongest circuit. I had a great race there last year, obviously won it on the road, but my own fault, tried to lunge Bobby at Lodge and just got it wrong. And of course, I paid the price with the penalty, which I fully deserved. So yeah, Alton Park I'm looking forward to. I think Anglesey will be quite interesting because we haven't raced there, and obviously it's going to be a 24-hour cycle, so it'll be going into the night and through the day. So yes, that'll be quite interesting. But yeah, no, I'll just take each round as it comes, and the one I'm looking forward to is the next one, as they say.
Nice. Take them each as they come and fire them off and hopefully score some good points. Well, thank you very much for joining me in the commentary booth, Jamie. It's been a pleasure to get some insight. Well, hopefully we see you back in a week's time when we head to Donington.
Yeah, absolutely. And just I'd like to thank Gary Preble for keeping Mark and Nathan very busy at the beginning because they were actually catching me. So yes, and also thank you to Mark Raddenbury for the fantastic liveries that he's done. Every car looks absolutely stunning. And a happy new year to everyone.
Of course, thank you very much, Jamie. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Well, that is, of course, Jamie Pitzenis, who finished in second place at the end. He said himself, a fairly boring affair, but we're going to take a chat with reigning champion, of course, Bobby Simmons. P3 at the end of that one, but quite an eventful race and quite a lot of pressure towards the end.
That was by far my most uncomfortable race I've ever done in sim racing. I don't know whether it's Dan or Ben. They've got the same name. I sort of was just looking at the car, but what a drive. That was an amazing battle at the end there by both of us.
It was, yeah, fantastic to watch. And I can imagine that was probably the longest 3 laps of your life, having to constantly check your mirrors and such. But you held off the pressure really, really nicely. And all in all, a really good way to kick things off, of course. Not quite the win, but I think probably a good stepping stone for the season to hold your crown.
Yes, absolutely. I came into this event, I won last year, but I came into this event knowing that I would nowhere be near the quickest, and it was, my fears were, realised in qualifying when I really qualified 5th. But I was like, as long as I don't lose positions, I'm still in the championship hunt, because what you don't realise is that you can lose this championship in one race, one big accident, because the point system, but that's just how it is. So I just tried to keep on pace, and then I was following some of the faster guys. And can I just say, Gary Preble was the most influential backmarker I've ever had in a race. He single-handedly made that 3rd place possible for me, from early on in the race to late on in the race. So we're giving the draft, letting the draft go. But yeah.
So potentially when you win the yards test that you can't have, you're going to give it to him as a special shout-out for getting you this 3rd place. Is that right?
Well, I think he's got an arts test already,
Oh,
but I think he's got his race license, but I don't know. I don't think I'm just trying to stay in the hunt this year, trying to defend my title. That's all I'm here for this year.
Well, Tom's already given you some fighting words. He says he's coming for it. He said he let him down at the end of the last season. So, well, not the end because he did really well at the end of last season, but over the course of all of last season, he wants to come for that crown. So I'm sure it should be a really heated rivalry between you two. But just talking about the season ahead, actually, I mean, are you looking forward to the tracks that we've got ahead, or have you peaked?
No, I've definitely not peaked this. Last year, I said that this was my worst race of the year because it's just straight. I just get really distracted looking at something else. You go into a corner, you're like, oh god! But there, a Snetterton as well. I think I need to practice big time, but because we've got 2 almost sprint races with that, I think that'll be quite interesting.
Should be indeed. I really am looking forward to Snetterton. Not only is it a really good track, but also just that format change really should liven things up, of course, and yeah, should really throw a spanner into the works. But thank you, Bobby, of course, for coming in and having a chat. Of course, congratulations on your P3 to kickstart what could be a championship defence from your part, and I have absolutely no doubt that we'll see you back in the commentary booth in a week's time when we head to Donny.
Okay, right. I'll say it now. I'll see you there then.
Awesome. Confidence. That's what I like to see. Bobby, well done. Take care. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Bobby Simmons, reigning champion. P3 at the end of the first round of the EnduroKA Sim Series. Of course, there you can see was joined by Jack Rowell a little bit earlier on. Unfortunately, some internet issues from his part has seen him only be able to take part in sort of the first 10 minutes or so, but he will be back over the course of the rest of the season. My name has been Zach Sweeney. We've had Mike Yao pushing the buttons behind the scenes, and of course a big thank you to Burton Power for sponsoring this this season of the EnduroKA Winter Sim Series. There you can see them, of course, also for providing the ARDS license test to the top 3 in the championship battle. Thank you, of course, to Gridfinder and EnduroKA, and of course to Positive Perceptions for providing the liveries to the majority of the field as well. Without these guys, it would be almost impossible to get this championship up and running. Thank you to all the hard work behind the scenes from the likes of Toby Owen as well, all the hard work that's get put into Sim Racing Championship. It definitely isn't easy, So, of course, without those hardworking people, it would be very difficult to have a successful championship where all of these drivers are competing for some fairly decent prizes as well. But as I said, my name has been Zach and it's been an absolute pleasure to be in the commentary booth talking over this insane amount of action that we had over the course of those 60 minutes. In a week's time, we'll head to Donington to do it all over again. But from us here in the commentary booth, it's goodbye for now.
Gridfinder is the home of sim racing leagues. Our management tools allow you to recruit drivers and monitor their ratings and live splits. Find this and more at gridfinder.com. Sign up for free today.